You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper than again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 10th part of What If Naruto Enters K-Pop Demon Hunters. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Slygold on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Word spread quickly. The private wing, usually reserved for high-ranking officials or foreign diplomats, was sealed off tighter than anyone had ever seen. Black-suited guards patrolled every hallway, weapons gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. Security cameras had been tripled. Even the nurses whispered as they moved, trading theories like currency. Prime Minister? No, some foreign prince maybe. Could be a Yakuza boss they're protecting. Nobody outside that ward knew the truth. To the city, it was just another secret, tucked away behind reinforced doors. But inside, the weight of that secret pressed heavy. Naruto lay back against the pillow, every scar on his body burning in silent protest. Sakura's bed was across from his, the faint beeping of her monitor steady but fragile. Sasuke sat between them like a sentinel, his arms crossed, his gaze sharp every time the door so much as creaked. He didn't trust the guards outside. Didn't trust the civilians lingering in the lobby below, craning their necks for a glimpse of someone important. If they knew it was Naruto and Sakura in here, if they knew hunters were recovering just a floor away, there would be chaos. Worship. Fear. Both. Naruto shifted, grimacing, his voice a hoarse whisper. All this security, it's too much. Sasuke didn't even glance at him. No. It's barely enough. Naruto let out a dry laugh, though it hurt. What do they think we are, gods? Sasuke's jaw flexed. To them? Maybe. For a moment, silence fell again until Naruto's hand tightened into a fist against the sheets. His voice cracked, softer now. If I'd been stronger, Sakura wouldn't have fallen. I wouldn't have ended up half dead. I should have finished it faster. I should have. Sasuke cut him off sharply. Enough. Naruto blinked, caught off guard by the edge in his tone. You think I don't feel the same? Sasuke's eyes finally turned toward him, dark and burning. If I'd been faster, sharper, she wouldn't have collapsed in front of me. If I'd been stronger, you wouldn't have been burned and broken. But sitting here blaming yourself, he gestured toward Sakura's bed, where she lay pale but alive, that's not what she fought for. That's not what you fight for either. Naruto's chest ached worse than his wounds. He looked at Sakura, then down at his hands, scarred and trembling. His throat tightened. Still feels like I failed. Sasuke leaned back in the chair, gaze returning to the door, his voice low but firm. You didn't fail. You lived. She lived. That's the only measure that matters. Naruto closed his eyes, trying to believe it, but the guilt lingered all the same. Outside, the guards shifted again. The nurses whispered. And the world kept wondering who could possibly be hidden in that locked wing, drawing so much protection. The sharp rhythm of heels echoed down the sterile hallway. Guards snapped straighter at their posts as Tsunade swept past, the fifth Hokage moving with a purpose that made even the most seasoned men step aside. Her coat shifted with each stride, and though she held no weapon in hand, every hunter in the building knew who she was. They didn't dare question her. She didn't slow when she reached the checkpoint. One guard moved to speak, but she simply flashed the insignia pinned to her chest as if she needed to. Recognition hit them instantly. Backs stiffened, heads bowed, and the reinforced door clicked open at her approach. Tsunade pushed through, the air inside heavy with antiseptic and quiet beeping. She saw them immediately. Naruto propped against his bed, his skin blackened in places, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and guilt, Sakura pale and unmoving across from him, machines whispering her fragile stability, Sasuke perched between them like a sentry, Sharingan dark eyes never leaving the door until he recognized her. Her gaze flicked to each of them in turn, sharp as a scalpel. Relief and anger warred in her chest, but her voice stayed level, commanding, as the door shut behind her. Report. Sasuke stood as Tsunade entered, his presence calm but sharp, like a blade still cooling from the forge. He didn't waste time. We encountered multiple clusters, he began, his tone clipped and professional. Initial contact on the surface. Low-level demons, disguised in human forms. They were eliminated before they could cause civilian casualties. His Sharingan eyes flicked towards Sakura's bed, then back to Tsunade. We captured one for interrogation. It confirmed the leaders were stationed in the sewers, 7 Nukenin demons. Unknown ranks. That was the only intel before it expired. He straightened, his voice steady. Sakura engaged 3 Chunin class. She used Mokuton resonance and Willow stance effectively, but stimulants and injuries forced her collapse. I secured her and called for medics before rejoining. A pause, his jaw tightening. I eliminated my target's 3 more Chunin. But it left Naruto against the Jonin. He reached into his cloak and produced the sword, its faint hum still lingering with residual power. The Jonin carried Raijin. Naruto was forced into precision fighting under collapsing tunnels. He pushed beyond safe limits. 1. His hand closed around the hilt before he offered it to Tsunade, reverence cutting through his usual edge. This is proof. Only then did his voice slip, just a little lower, heavier. Naruto's alive, but he's badly burned. He still asked if the mission was complete before collapsing. That's the only reason I'm standing here. Because he didn't quit. The words landed like stones in the quiet, the hum of machines filling the space he left. Tsunade's hand lingered on the Raijin blade, her reflection caught in the lightning-hued steel. She turned it slowly, feeling the hum of power coil in her palm. The Raijin, she murmured, her voice taut with reverence. Tobirama's sword. My great-uncle's blade. Her eyes narrowed, the words tasting bitter. And now it's been in the hands of a demon. Her jaw flexed as she set the weapon aside, careful as though it might shatter. Then she turned, and her gaze fell on Naruto's still form stretched across the bed. Burn marks ran across his chest and arms, skin blackened in places where lightning had carved itself into him. His breathing was shallow but steady, each rise and fall of his chest proof that he had pushed past what should have been possible. For a long moment, Tsunade didn't speak. Her eyes softened, the unshakable mask of the Hokage slipping just enough to show the woman underneath, the granddaughter, the medic, the one who had seen too many bodies carried home. When she finally spoke, her voice carried both steel and something warmer. Good job. Sasuke blinked. For all her usual bluntness, there was an emotion in those 2 words that struck him hard. He bowed, crisp and sharp, but her eyes weren't on him. They never left Naruto. The boy who had taken on a Jonin-class demon in collapsing tunnels. The boy who had bled and burned but still fought until victory was certain. The boy who, somehow, survived. Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper, meant more for herself than anyone else. How badly did you suffer, and still you kept going? Sasuke remained bowed, respectful silence stretching between them. But in that moment, it was clear, for all her titles and rank, Tsunade wasn't looking at a soldier. She was looking at a miracle. Tsunade's eyes lingered on Naruto's still chest, his breath shallow but steady. The heart monitor ticked softly, each beep like a reminder of how close he'd come. Sasuke straightened from his bow, his voice even but carrying a quiet edge. He didn't just take down the Jonin. The tunnels collapsed, the Raijin cut him, burned him, electrocuted him, and when he finished it, Sasuke's lips tightened, as if forcing himself to say it out loud, he was struck by lightning. The words hit the room heavier than any blade. For a second, Tsunade didn't move. Her gaze sharpened, tracing every blackened mark across Naruto's body as if she could see the path the lightning had carved into him. The burns, the scorched edges of hair, the twitch in his fingers when a muscle spasmed. All of it painted a picture she knew too well, a body pushed to the very brink of death. Her hands curled into fists at her side, knuckles white. "And he's still breathing," she whispered, equal parts awe and anger. "This reckless BRT." But even as she said it, her voice cracked faintly. She stepped closer, pulling the blanket up just enough to cover his chest, as though protecting him even here. "Good job," she repeated, firmer this time, though her eyes glistened when they rested on him. Sasuke bowed his head once more. But again, he knew those words weren't for him. They were for Naruto, and Naruto alone. Tsunade stood over Naruto a moment longer, every inch of her healer's instinct fighting the part of her that wanted to shake him awake and scold him. But the monitors stayed steady, the boy unresponsive. She exhaled through her nose and finally turned to the next bed. Sakura lay pale beneath the covers, her breath shallow but steady, her arm wrapped in bandages where the burns had charred skin. Her foreline carried a slow drip of antidotes and stabilizers. Tsunade's eyes softened. This one pushed herself past every limit, she murmured, brushing stray hair from Sakura's face. Too many stimulants. Too much poison on her blade. She should have been dead. She refused to fall, Sasuke said quietly from behind her. His voice carried no pride, no exaggeration, just the flat truth of what he'd witnessed. Even when her body was breaking. Tsunade's jaw worked. She clenched the rails of Sakura's bed until her knuckles went white. For a heartbeat, the fifth Hokage wasn't a leader or a healer. She was just a woman seeing her students broken, knowing they had chosen this path because she had let them. Finally, she released the bed and drew herself tall again, her tone clipped but thick with emotion. "You both made me proud. But DMNU," her voice cracked, eyes flicking from Sakura to Naruto, "for nearly killing yourselves to do it." Her words weren't loud, but they carried weight heavier than thunder. Tsunade lingered a long while, her eyes fixed on Naruto's burned form before sliding to Sakura's pale one. She exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with everything she didn't say. "Kakashi should be proud," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Her gaze sharpened as she looked back at Sasuke. "Not just of you but of all three of you. You've proven what true hunters are supposed to be." Sasuke straightened at her words, bowing his head slightly in acknowledgement. She stepped closer to the beds again, voice low but firm. "Nowadays too many chase the title for glory, for fame, for money. But the three of you," her hand lingered over Sakura's arm, then brushed the air above Naruto's chest as though she might touch him. "You carry something rarer. You carry the will of fire." The room went quiet. Even the medics paused in their movements, as if the words demanded stillness. Tsunade's jaw tightened. "And that fire will burn brighter for what you've given tonight." Sasuke's fists clenched at his sides. For all the guilt boiling in his veins, he couldn't argue with her. Not when he'd seen them fight with his own eyes. Tsunade stood a moment longer, the silence pressing down like stone. Then she rolled her shoulders, flexing her hands until golden resonance sparked at her fingertips. "Step aside," she ordered the medics. They obeyed instantly. Everyone in the room knew what it meant when the fifth Hokage decided to take matters into her own hands. Her palms hovered over Sakura first. The glow deepened, warm and steady, sinking into torn muscle and scorched flesh. Sakura stirred faintly in her sleep, her breathing easing as the burns along her arm faded to faint pink scars and the jagged cuts along her back knit themselves closed. Tsunade's brow furrowed in concentration, but she didn't stop until the worst of it was gone. "She'll recover by tomorrow," Tsunade said quietly. "Don't let her pretend otherwise." She still needs to rest. Then she turned to Naruto. The damage here was worse. His skin was blackened in patches, raw in others, his muscles twitching from the lightning strike still echoing through him. Tsunade's resonance swelled brighter, flooding through him in long, patient waves. Slowly, the burns lost their angry edges, the trembling eased, the worst of the tears closed beneath her hands. He still looked battered, his body too strained to recover in a single sitting, but he no longer looked on the edge of death. She drew back at last, shoulders tight, sweat beading her brow. 3 days, she muttered. Minimum. He won't be leaving this hospital sooner. He tries, and I'll chain him to the bed myself. The medics glanced at each other, nodding. None doubted she meant it. Tsunade wiped her hands on a cloth, already pulling her phone from her pocket. Celine needs to know. They'll want to visit in the morning. Her call was short, her words clipped but steady. When she hung up, she looked once more at the 2 unconscious hunters. Then she turned, her heels clicking as she strode out. The guards straightened instantly at her approach, parting without a word as the 5th Hokage left the wing behind. Celine set the phone down with shaking hands. The room felt too quiet, the shadows stretching long against the walls. She pressed her palms together, but they wouldn't stop trembling. Naruto. She had always known this was the risk of raising a hunter. She had seen too many fall, buried too many names with her own hands. She had already lost Minato. Lost Kushina. Both swallowed by the same merciless path. And yet somehow, Naruto had become her heart all over again. Not by BLD, not by name, but by the way he laughed, by the way he carried his pain without letting it sour him, by the way he threw himself into danger because he would rather it be him than anyone else. Every choice he made echoed the people she had loved and lost. When she looked at him, she saw Kushina's fire. That reckless, boundless energy, the way she could turn the darkest room into sunlight just by being in it. She saw Minato too, the calm in chaos, the sharp mind always a step ahead, the humility in his smile. But Naruto wasn't just a shadow of them. He was himself. And that made it all the more unbearable. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she hated herself for letting him get that close, for letting her heart reopen after everything. Hunters weren't supposed to love like this. They weren't supposed to let themselves feel this much, because the risk was always the same. And now, lying in some hospital bed with his body blackened by lightning, he could be gone just as quickly as they were. Her breath hitched, and she forced her hands against her face. Not him. Please, not him too. Naruto had become a son to her, piece by piece, without her even realizing it until now. If she lost him, if she had to watch another light extinguish in front of her, she wasn't sure she could survive it. Her eyes stung, tears threatening. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady though no one was there to hear. You're stronger than this, she whispered. You always were. Don't you dare leave me too, Naruto. The morning sun burned pale over Tokyo, but Celine's mind was already racing. She hadn't slept a moment. When dawn broke, she gathered the girls without hesitation. Rehearsal can wait, God damn it, she snapped when Bobby started to protest. They're hurt. That's all that matters. Bobby, caught by the raw steel in her voice, just nodded and stepped aside. The girls didn't know the whole truth, only that Naruto and Sakura were injured but stable. Celine had made sure of that. Still, the worry in their eyes was enough. Rumi clutched her coat a little too tightly. Mira pressed her lips into a thin line. Zoe, normally quick with a joke, walked in silence. By the time they reached the hospital, security had already locked down the private wing. Guards flanked the doors, their eyes sharp, rifles gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the hush of curiosity, pedestrians clustered at a distance, whispering, craning their necks to see who could possibly warrant so much protection. Celine adjusted her own disguise, simple cap, mask, and plain jacket. The girls mirrored her, all four blending into the slow stream of visitors heading inside. But unlike the others, their steps carried urgency, their silence brittle. Inside, the polished lobby felt cavernous. Every echo of their footsteps seemed too loud, every glance from the nurses too long. As they approached the elevator, Rumi finally whispered, her voice shaking, "They'll be okay, right?" Celine forced herself to nod, though her throat tightened around the word. "Yes. They'll be okay." The doors slid open. They stepped in. The ride was silent, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. When the elevator dinged, two guards waited. Their rifles lowered slightly at the sight of Celine flashing her hunter's badge. One of them stepped aside with a respectful nod. The hallway stretched before them, stark and sterile. Behind those closed doors lay the truth, the extent of what the girls didn't yet know. And as they walked down that hall, Celine's hands shook all over again. The door creaked open. Celine went first, her hand tightening on the knob until her knuckles whitened. The girls followed, hearts hammering, disguises slipping as their eyes locked onto the sight inside. 2 beds. 2 still forms. Naruto lay in the closest, his body wrapped in fresh bandages, skin mottled from burns that even Tsunade's healing hadn't fully erased. Tubes snaked into his arm, the monitor by his side tracing a slow, steady rhythm. He looked smaller somehow as TRPPD of that storm's fury, just a boy who had given too much. Beside him, Sakura rested in her own bed. Paler, but breathing evenly, her chest rising and falling without strain. Her hair stuck to her temple, damp from sweat, but she looked stable. Safe. For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Rumi's hands flew to her mouth. Zoe froze in the doorway, eyes wide. Mira broke first, rushing past the beds until she found Sasuke standing near the corner, arms folded, his Sharingan eye dulled but his face tight. "Sasuke," she blurted, clutching at his sleeve. Are you okay?" He looked down at her, and for the first time in days, his shoulders eased, just slightly. "I'm fine," he said, his voice low, steady. They took the worst of it." Myra's throat closed. She didn't let go, her grip firm, as if keeping him tethered. Rumi edged closer to Naruto's bed, her legs shaky. She wanted to touch him, to brush his hair back from his face, but her fingers hovered just above him, afraid she'd hurt him. Zoe finally stepped in, whispering, "Gods, they look like they went through hell." Celine put a hand on her shoulder, squeezing, her own eyes never leaving Naruto. Like Minato. Like Kushina. And now him. But she swallowed the fear down. "They came back alive," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "That's what matters." The air in the hospital wing felt heavy, quieter than it should have been. The soft beeping of monitors filled the silence as Rumi finally sank into the chair by Naruto's bed. Her hand hovered, then finally rested lightly over his bandaged one. "You idiot," she whispered, her throat tight. Always pushing until there's nothing left, her fingers trembled as she brushed against his knuckles. "You better wake up. I didn't wait 5 years just to lose you now." Behind her, Mira still clung to Sasuke's sleeve, her voice steadier now but her eyes still red. "You scared us half to death." Sasuke's hand flexed over hers, grounding her. "We came back. That's all that matters." The door opened again, softer this time. Not a crash, not a booming voice, but a careful step. Lee slipped inside. His hair was tied back, his posture straighter than usual, but his expression was carved in worry. There was no loud declaration, no dramatic entrance, just a man seeing the girl he loved laid out on a hospital bed. He moved past everyone without a word until he was beside Sakura. His hand hovered above her, hesitant, before he finally sat down in the chair at her side. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead with a touch so gentle it looked foreign coming from him. "She fought hard," Sasuke said quietly, watching him. Lee nodded, eyes fixed on Sakura's sleeping face. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. Of course she did. That's who she is. Celine exhaled slowly, her arms folded. She had seen the chaos of the field, seen hunters torn apart and still claw their way back. But seeing all of them like this, Naruto, Sakura, even Sasuke worn at the edges, it reminded her too much of Minato, of Kushina. The cost of this life never changed. But as she looked around the room, the girls close together, Sasuke grounded by Mira, Lee keeping silent vigil at Sakura's side, and Rumi refusing to let go of Naruto's hand, she knew one thing for certain. They weren't alone. Not anymore. The steady rhythm of the monitor filled the room, soft and unchanging. Rumi kept her vigil at Naruto's side, eyes heavy, hands still clasped around his. Across the wing, Sakura stirred with a faint groan, lashes fluttering as she pulled herself back to consciousness. Sakura. Lee's voice was immediate, low but full of restrained urgency. He leaned forward in the chair he hadn't left since arriving. When her eyes cracked open, he nearly exhaled in relief. You're awake. Sakura blinked up at him, her mind still foggy from the stimulants and the strain. Lee. Before she could say more, he leaned closer and pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle, reverent. His hands trembled as he pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. You are incredible. Even now, you still fight. His voice cracked, and he swallowed it down. I was so afraid I'd lost you. She managed a small, tired smile, her lips curving faintly. I'm not that easy to get rid of. Lee laughed softly, a sound that carried none of his usual booming energy. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. Strong and stubborn. That's my Sakura. Sasuke glanced over from where he stood near the window, watching quietly. Mira's hand squeezed his, grounding him as his eyes flicked between Naruto's still form and Sakura's recovery. Relief softened the tension in his shoulders. Rumi leaned closer to Naruto, whispering under her breath. Come on, love. If she can wake up, so can you. But Naruto didn't stir. His breath stayed shallow, steady, and his body still twitched faintly from the lightning that had raked through him. The contrast was stark. One fighter returned to them, smiling weakly at her boyfriend's devotion. And another, still lost in the quiet, fighting a different battle within. 3 hours slipped by in hushed tones and the quiet shuffle of nurses. The guards outside shifted on their feet, but no one disturbed the silence of the private wing. Celine finally stood, smoothing her coat. All right, girls, let's give them some space. Zoe and Mira nodded, weary but obedient. Even Sasuke and Sakura rose, Lee gently supporting Sakura as they made plans to grab lunch. Only Rumi stayed rooted, her hand still twined with Naruto's. I'll stay, she said softly, not looking up. Celine's gaze lingered on her for a moment, but there was no reprimand, no argument. She just nodded once. All right. Then she ushered the others out, the door clicking shut behind them. The room quieted again, broken only by the steady hum of the monitors and the faint drip of N4. Rumi sat there, her thumb tracing slow circles against Naruto's calloused hand. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, but no sign came that he heard her. Leaning closer, she brushed her lips against the back of his hand. I love you, she whispered, the words trembling free at last. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't pull away. She rested her head on the edge of the mattress, her hair spilling across his arm, and closed her eyes. You don't have to say it back yet, she murmured, voice barely audible. Just come back to me. That's all I need. And so she stayed, her heartbeat sinking to the slow, stubborn rhythm of his. The hours bled into night. The hall outside stayed guarded, shadows of armed hunters shifting across the frosted glass windows of the wing. Pedestrians outside the hospital whispered and speculated, but no one knew who lay inside that heavily protected ward. Inside Naruto's room, the dim light hummed softly overhead. Rumi hadn't moved far from his side all day, her hand always clasped around his, thumb brushing over the rough skin of his knuckles. The monitors beeped steady, a comfort and a torment all at once. She pulled her chair closer until her knees touched the bed frame, and eventually, exhaustion pulled her down. First her arms, then her cheek pressed gently against his shoulder. She hadn't planned to sleep, but her body had other ideas. A nurse peeked in, frowning at the sight of her practically curled against the patient. "Miss, you can't." But one of the hunter guards outside leaned in, his glare sharp enough to cut steel. "She stays." The nurse swallowed, muttered something about protocol, and shut the door without another word. Hours later, the hum of the city outside faded to silence. Rumi had climbed onto the mattress itself, her head tucked under Naruto's chin, his arm limp but still heavy enough to feel like it was holding her. She clutched the blanket with one hand and his shirt with the other, as if letting go might wake her from a dream she wasn't ready to leave. The machines carried on, steady and patient. And for that night, wrapped in quiet and the warmth of his body, Rumi let herself believe everything would be all right. She drifted into sleep, heart pressed to his, unwilling to move until he opened his eyes again. Naruto stirred first, the faint glow of morning sneaking past the curtains. His body ached, muscles twitching faintly from the lightning, but nothing compared to the warmth pressed against him. Rumi lay curled in his arms, hair loose, her breathing soft and steady against his chest. For a long moment, he didn't move. Just watched her. After everything, the fight, the hospital, the chaos, this felt like a dream. He let out a quiet chuckle. "Guess getting struck by lightning isn't all bad," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "If it means I wake up with you." Rumi's eyes fluttered open, still heavy with sleep. She blinked at him, trying to place his words, and when they sank in, her whole face went crimson. She sat up sharply, glaring down at him. "Idiot." Naruto winced and coughed when she swatted at his chest. Sorry," he muttered quickly, holding up his hands in mock defense. But the humor didn't last. His hands dropped, one instinctively finding hers, their fingers weaving tight. His voice grew serious, lower than before. "But you know I can't promise this. I can't promise I'll always wake up here. That I'll always come back." The words cut sharper than any blade. Rumi froze, her lips trembling. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but deep down she knew. She'd always known. Her voice came small, cracking around the edges. "Then promise me you'll try. Promise me you won't give up on coming home." Naruto's jaw clenched. He swallowed hard, eyes dropping for a second before he leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. His voice was barely a whisper, but every word was carved into stone. "I promise I'll try. I'll come back to you." Rumi shut her eyes, tears threatening but not falling, and nodded quickly. She pressed herself against him, arms winding tight around his scarred frame. He held her back just as fiercely, sighing into her hair, like that vow itself gave him enough strength to breathe. From the doorway, a nurse stopped, clearing her throat as if about to scold Rumi for being in the bed. But the hunter guards stationed outside turned their glares on her, sharp as blades. She muttered under her breath and walked on, deciding against picking that fight. The hospital buzzed outside, but in their room, the world had shrunk. For Naruto and Rumi, it was just this moment, the warmth of each other's arms, the fragile promise made in the morning light, and the stubborn hope that no matter what demons came, they'd find their way back here again. The room stayed hushed, only the faint beeping of the monitor breaking the silence. Rumi clung to him, Naruto's breath steady against her hair. For once, it felt like the world had slowed. The door opened without a knock. Tsunade stepped in, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She carried herself like a storm, barely contained sharp eyes, shoulders squared, every inch the Hokage. But when her gaze landed on Naruto, something in her softened. "Good job," she said simply, voice low but weighted. She crossed to his bedside and set her hand over his chest. Golden energy flared from her palms, humming low and steady. It flowed into him, wrapping around torn muscle, weaving through veins and nerves. His body trembled under the warmth as the light threaded deeper, burning away the damage until skin smoothed and strength returned. Rumi gasped as she watched the burns vanish, his body restored before her eyes. Naruto's breath eased, the tension unwinding from his frame, until it looked as though he had never been touched by battle at all. After a few moments, Tsunade pulled back, exhaling. "That's the best I can give you for now. You've already pushed your body past the line twice over. You're alive because you're too stubborn to die." Naruto gave a tired half-smile. "Guess that's a compliment." Her lips twitched, but she didn't return the smile. "One day. You stay here one more day, then you report back to the leaf. We'll see if you're cleared for duty." He opened his mouth to argue he hated hospitals, but Rumi shot him a sharp glare that silenced him faster than any order. He sighed, shoulders slumping. "One day. Got it. Good." Tsunade turned for the door, pausing just long enough to glance back. Her eyes lingered, not on the machines or the bed, but on the sight of Rumi still clutching his hand like she'd never let go. "You did well, Naruto. Don't forget that." Then she was gone, leaving behind the faint shimmer of golden energy in the air, heavy as it was reassuring. Rumi brushed her thumb over his knuckles, whispering softly, "She's right. You did." Naruto let his eyes close, finally allowing himself to rest, her warmth still tucked firmly against him. The door closed behind Tsunade, her golden energy still lingering faintly in the room. Naruto leaned back against the pillows, breathing easier than he had since the fight. Rumi stayed tucked close to his side, her hand still wrapped around his. Not long after, the door cracked open again. Sasuke stepped in first, mask off, his usual calm expression unreadable. Sakura followed, carrying a thin envelope. "Back already?" Naruto asked, brow lifting. Sakura smiled faintly. "We had business with the officials. They wanted to make sure you got this directly." She handed him the envelope. Naruto frowned at it, confused, until Sasuke tilted his chin. "Open it." Naruto slid the flap open, pulling out a crisp check. His eyes widened. 66,666,666 won. And 70 John. Rumi glanced at it once and just hummed. "Not bad." Naruto gawked at her. "Not bad? Rumi, that's more money than I've ever seen in my life." She smirked, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Huntrix has been on world tours for 5 years, Naruto. We're all millionaires. That number doesn't scare me." Naruto sagged back against the pillows, muttering, "Great. My girlfriend's my sugar mommy." Rumi went scarlet, smacked his arm hard, and hissed, "Naruto." But when he grinned up at her soft, boyish, completely at ease, her anger dissolved instantly. She couldn't even pretend to stay mad. She huffed, cheeks blazing, and muttered, "Idiot." Sasuke shook his head, though his smirk betrayed him. "Money doesn't matter." "Not really. Strength does. Survival does. And the will to keep fighting." Naruto sobered a little at that, nodding. "Yeah. You're right, SAS." But Rumi still leaned against him, her face hot, and when Naruto kissed the top of her head like nothing had happened, she decided maybe being his sugar mommy wasn't the worst thing in the world. The afternoon slipped by in easy conversation, laughter softening the sharp edges of the past days. Sasuke and Sakura eventually rose, Sakura promising to check in when they reached the leaf. Sasuke gave Naruto one last look, that rare flicker of brotherhood in his eyes, before they disappeared through the hospital doors. The room grew quiet. The bustle of the hospital faded into a low hum behind the walls. Rumi curled against Naruto's side, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. They said little, because they didn't need to. Just the steady rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her hand in his, was enough. Night crept in, the glow of Tokyo lights spilling faintly through the blinds. Naruto traced slow circles on her back with his thumb, the weight of everything pressing against his chest, but for once, it didn't feel heavy. Not with her there. "Rumi," he whispered. She tilted her head up, eyes searching his. Naruto's heart pounded, but he didn't look away. He leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. His voice came low, steady, trembling just a little. "I love you." For a heartbeat she froze, wide-eyed, breath caught in her throat. Then color flooded her cheeks, and she lifted her face to his. Her lips brushed his softly, sure and warm. "I love you too." Naruto's arms tightened around her, pulling her close as if he could anchor himself to that moment forever. And for the first time since the storm in Tokyo, he felt whole. They didn't let go of each other that night. Rumi's head stayed tucked beneath Naruto's chin, her breath warm against his chest, his arms curled protectively around her as if the world might try to steal her away in her sleep. Words weren't needed anymore. The quiet said everything, the confession spoken, the promise sealed. By the time the sun rose, neither of them had moved much. Nurses came and went, checking Naruto's vitals, whispering about discharge papers, but neither he nor Rumi stirred. They only tightened their hold, as if to remind the other they were still there. At noon, Tsunade herself returned, striding in briskly. She looked Naruto over, pressing her palm against his chest, golden resonance spilling into him once more. "You're cleared to leave," she said, though her tone carried the weight of authority. "One day off duty, no more. Report to the leaf after." "Understood." Naruto bowed his head respectfully. "Understood, Hokage-sama." Rumi slipped her hand into his as they left the hospital, both in simple disguises, hoods up, masks on, blending with the tide of Tokyo streets. To the world, they were nobody. Just two young adults, walking side by side, fingers laced together. But beneath the masks, their smiles were real. The confession the night before had shifted something between them, grounding their bond in a way that felt unshakable. Each step carried that warmth deeper, a quiet joy neither of them could contain. High above, in the cold shadow of an unfinished tower, a figure waited. Pale skin caught the city's glow, and serpentine yellow eyes narrowed with cruel delight. Orochimaru's tongue flicked against his lips as he watched the couple vanish into the crowd. Kukuku, his laugh slithered like oil through the empty steel beams. "So this is your anchor, Naruto? How precious." He tilted his head, savoring the thought. "I can't wait to see her scream." The next morning, Naruto reported back to the Leaf branch office in Tokyo, his cloak and mask marking him not as a pop idol's boyfriend, but as a hunter of the Leaf. The fatigue of the hospital hadn't fully left him, but his stride was steady, his expression sharp. Inside the briefing room, the mission scroll lay across the table, the kanji stamped in bold red. Tsunade's voice carried as she explained, her tone clipped but weighted with the gravity of what lay ahead. "Tempered steel," she said, unrolling the scroll to reveal sketches of massive bars and blades glowing faintly with sealed runes. "Forged to kill demons outright. No banishment, no feeding GWIMA. True death. The Cloud has developed new methods of refining it, and they've agreed to share part of their shipment. It's to be transported to Russia, where both Leaf and Cloud forces are establishing a joint front." Sasuke leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And we're the SCRT?" Tsunade nodded. "Exactly. A-class assignment. You'll move as a unit the Willow Serpent, the Black Fawn, and the Stormbringer." Her gaze lingered on Naruto when she said the name, and though he shifted awkwardly, he didn't argue. Sakura straightened her gloves. "If demons get wind of this shipment, they'll try to take it," Tsunade finished. "And they will get wind of it. You'll be moving through territories riddled with activity. Failure isn't an option. If the steel falls into the wrong hands, every village pays the price. The three exchanged quick nods. Naruto rested his hand on his crimson blade, his voice calm but resolute. Then we make sure it doesn't. Tsunade allowed herself the smallest smile. Good. You leave at dusk. Transport will be waiting at the docks. Dismissed. Rumi slipped back into the penthouse late that afternoon, cheeks still pink from saying goodbye to Naruto. Mira and Zoe were already stretching out in the rehearsal room, the speakers humming low. Bobby paced near the mirrors, hands on his peach, muttering like a man with too many plates spinning. The second he saw Rumi, his grumbling burst out. Is he okay? He just got fried by lightning, nearly cooked alive, and now he's back on missions already? Who signs off on this? Does he even sleep? Does he? Mira smirked, leaning back on her hands. Gods, Bobby. For a guy who claims he doesn't like Naruto, you sure can't shut up about him. Bobby sputtered, pointing at her like she'd just accused him of blasphemy. I do like Naruto. He's respectful, polite, doesn't give me gray hairs like the rest of you. What I don't like, he jabbed a finger at the air, is Sasuke. That kid looks at me like he's planning my funeral every time I walk in the room. Zoe snorted, nearly choking on her water. That's just his face. Yeah, well, his face needs to learn some manners, Bobby shot back, though the edge softened as Mira chuckled and Rumi tried not to laugh. The rehearsal rolled on, voices carrying, movements sharp. But every so often Bobby glanced toward Rumi, as if making sure she wasn't worrying too much. For all his complaining, it was clear, Naruto had won him over, even if Bobby would rather eat glass than admit it outright. They were halfway through warm-ups when a cluster of boys walked by, doing that practiced, oblivious strut that made half the staff melt and the other half roll their eyes. Two of them had pink hair, one the color of cotton candy, the other a darker magenta that looked like a scowl given form. Another wore sky blue hair, bright enough to hurt, and the last one had lilac that fell over his eyes in a curtain of cool disinterest. Myra's eyes went wide and a little wild. Zoe's face went cartoonish stars and hearts and a sound that very nearly became actual popcorn popping. Rumi rolled her eyes so hard she almost saw the back of her head. So hot, Mira breathed. Ugh. You guys are so gross, Rumi said, though she wasn't looking away. Of course she wasn't. No one ever really looked away when a show of pretty boys passed close enough to touch. Then a shadowed figure, black-haired and unreadable, brushed through the little crowd. He moved with an indifferent precision that made Rumi's world put on slow motion and insist on it. He didn't even notice her until he bumped into her and she toppled a box of tonic scattering in an arc like confetti. He paused long enough to dust his shoulder off, flat and small and perfectly rude, before turning away. Watch yourself, he muttered without looking. Watch your, Rumi snapped, scrambling to her knees and waving at the mess the boys had left. It was a decidedly ungraceful protest, more indignation than danger. The boys sauntered off, and for a second everyone let themselves go back to the rehearsal groove. Then music began to spill across the plaza, stupidly catchy and obnoxiously loud, and the air took on a purple dust like a stage trick. From around a corner the four boys reappeared, now on a tiny raised platform, lights and glitter and a choreography that had half the crowd cheering and the other half being dragged along against their better judgment. The Saja boys, loud, bright, and performatively sweet, had arrived. They started to sing. Hey, hey. Hey, hey. Hey, the chorus went, and the melody was exactly the sort that seeped into your head and refused to be polite about it. Jinnu, the black-haired one, the one who had shoved past Rumi, sang with a voice that slipped between honey and something colder. Rumi folded her arms. It's those stupid jerks again, she muttered. Zoe, who never missed an angle for fandom, was already bobbing in time. Mira, predictably, was finding fault without really meaning to. Rumi, against her will, felt the song prick the line between irritating and catchy. It lodged there and hummed. At the end of the first verse, Jinnu swiped something from the scattered tonics in Rumi's box. She counted quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pouches. One was missing from the neat rows she'd arranged only minutes before. Her mouth went dry. "He stole one of my pouches," she said, more to herself than to anyone. The boys kept performing, blowing kisses and forming theatrical hearts with their hands. Mira plucked one of the paper hearts from the air with a laugh. A stray tissue heart drifted and hit Zoe smack in the chest. She squealed and tucked it into her shirt like a treasure. "That was a magic trick," Zoe whispered with a grin that split her face. "Or sleight of hand. Maybe both." Mira and Rumi watched them closer. Something about the way the boys' arms moved, the way the light caught faint purple filigree beneath their sleeves, made the hair at the back of Myra's neck stand up. "Demon marks," Zoe breathed. The word came out half joke, half terrified realization. They weren't subtle. The marks pulsed under a sleeve as one of the Saja boys handed a foam heart to a child at the front. The kid squealed and took it with wide, trusting hands. Cheap plastic toys, glitter, the kind of candy that made parents smile. The boys smiled back with practiced warmth. Rumi's fists tightened. "Demon boy band," she said, and she did not hear any irony in her voice. "They're performing for families," Zoe said, trying to analyze, still trying to rationalize. "Maybe they're just tricking people into following them. A magician could do this." Mira was already moving, boots hitting cobblestone without a sound now that the face of the thing was clear. "Demons are never nice," she said bluntly. "We don't wait to find out." The Saja boys ramped up the chorus into something even more infectious, a bubblegum trap. "You're my soda pop, my little soda pop, cool me down, you're so hot." Rumi stared as Jinu pressed something into a kid's palm, a tiny glittering packet. The boy's eyes went wide, his grin grew a little too big. "They're feeding on the fans," Sakura would have said, Rumi thought. The idea tasted like iron. Mira stepped out of the group, hands already finding weapons and instincts ready. "If they're demons, we don't let them put on a show," she said. "Not here, not around children." Zoe, heart pounding with a mixture of giddiness and horror, tightened the strings of Rumi's hoodie until Rumi swatted her wrist. The pink smoke and the final high note collapsed like a curtain. Jinu's voice called, loud and theatrical, "That's it for now. See you tonight on everyone's favorite variety show. Saja boys love you." They blew a kissing rain at the crowd and vanished in a puff of shimmering dust, leaving the plaza sticky with aftermelody and stunned applause. People clapped and turned to one another, thrilled, none the wiser to the chill that had clung to the boys' smiles. Rumi didn't see applause. She saw the missing pouch, glitter on the child's palm, and the marks that had been revealed in the flash of stage lights. She saw a choreographed charm that wore a predator's patience like perfume. "There. Demons," she said again, voice low. "And we stop them now. Before they get the rest." Myra's jaw set. Zoe's face went hard and adult in a beat. "We kill them," Mira said simply. "No," Rumi said, because she could not bear the thought of more families being used. "Not in the plaza. Not surrounded by fans. We stop them before they leave." Zoe's eyes flashed. "Then let's sweep. Split lanes. I'll go with Mira, Rumi, you take the east exit. I'll distract any camera drones if they try to pull a vanish trick." They fell into motion easy, the way a team moved when it had done the job before. The girls threaded through the crowd with practiced invisibility, the public smiles and selfie poses parting like water around them. No one looked twice at their purposeful faces. That, more than anything, kept Rumi's stomach hollow, how easily the ordinary swallowed the monstrous without even hiccuping. On the far corner the sound of a siren began, distant and slow. The Saja boys had disappeared, but their footsteps would leave a trail. The trinket in the child's hand glittered under the afternoon light, and Rumi felt the weight of it like an accusation. "Get ready," she whispered. "When we hit them, we hit clean. No fans in the line of fire." Mira, Zoe, and Rumi nodded in the kind of agreement that meant there was no going back. The plaza glittered and hummed on, a living stage where nobody suspected the quiet hunt that had begun in the cracks beneath the music. They moved out hunters in plain sight and the city kept eating the song. They pressed forward, boots and sneakers barely making a sound among the scattering of post-show crowds. For a while it felt like a hunt in slow-motion footsteps, the hum of nearby speakers, the scent of street food and spilled soda, and then the trail thinned, threadbare as a popped balloon. Rumi kept her eyes on every wrist, every sleeve, searching for the faint violet tracery that had winked under the Saja boys' shirts. Mira darted between clusters of fans to check vans idling at the curb. Zoe scanned the plaza for cameras and drones, fingers tapping her comms like a metronome. They peeled off in practiced silence, a three-part formation designed to funnel, flank, and close. The plaza emptied into 5 branching alleys. The stage lights cast long bars across garbage cans and street posters. A food cart vendor swore softly as a tray tipped, a kid chased a runaway balloon. Nothing in the ordinary screamed demon. The ordinary was the worst camouflage. Rumi ran the route Jinnu had taken in her head: the corner, the lamppost, the vendor he'd passed. She checked every CCTV camera in the immediate radius, then the feed 2 streets over. Static. A shadow where the feed should have been. A brief, clipped slice of purple smoke caught on a frame before the feed cut to black. "DMN it," Zoe hissed. They scrubbed the cameras. Mira slammed her palm against a brick wall and then laughed short, sharp, furious. Either a professional tech scrubbed them, or whoever's backing those boys knows how to handle a live crowd. We just watched a performance and didn't notice our seats being switched. They followed the scent of the crowd: perfume, sweat, fried dough, and every scrap that could have been a sign. A paper heart crushed beneath a boot. Glitter clinging to a stroller. A tiny plastic pouch stuck to the sole of a shoe. Nothing that let them trace BLD to FANN. Rumi kept thinking of the missing pouch in her box. It had been tiny and harmless on the surface, an herbal stimulant, a backstage tonic she'd meant to hand to the crew. But she'd watched Jinnu press something into a kid's palm, watched the kid's eyes dilate and the grin widen into something too eager. Something that glittered. "We lost the trail at the east exit," Mira said, voice flat. "They boarded a van or teleported. Either way, there's no clean line to follow." Zoe jabbed her thumb at a STRP security camera feed on a kiosk screen. If they used a van, the traffic cams would catch a plate. But if someone scrubbed the feeds, she let the sentence drop. She'd seen too many things get erased from city servers to be naive. "We need someone with eyes in the system." Rumi swallowed. "Bobby's got contacts. He can ping the vendor cams and the private limos." Myra's jaw tightened. "We can't involve too many people. Fans panic, authorities overreact, and the wrong headline ruins everything. If the fanbase sees what's happening, the Han Moon gets attention we don't want." Zoe blinked at her, realization dawning. "Right. Keep it quiet. Small team." They split again to check 2 more exits and to question vendors who'd seen the boys vanish. One vendor remembered hearts flying through the crowd. A kid laughed and said he'd been handed a soda pop by someone in glitter. An old woman swore she'd seen 4 boys climb into a white van with tinted windows. Another shopkeeper shrugged and warned them about too many stray stage props. When they reconvened by the fountain, the plaza was emptying into a soft, suspicious hush. The missing pouch still burned in Rumi's thoughts. She dug inside her hoodie and found the ragged corner of a tissue with a smear of purple powder left from the box. Her fingers were shaking. "We should call Celine," she said finally. "She'll know what to do if this is more than a gimmick." Myra's look cut through her. "We don't blow this up publicly unless we have to. Celine can help us without a press release. Bobby can." "Bobby's already on it," Zoe said, tapping her comms. "He pinged the vehicle registry, and his guy says a white van with no plates left the north exit 5 minutes after the show. But nothing on the city cams. Private feeds were blacked for 30 seconds. Whoever scrubbed the footage knew exactly when to pull it. That's professional, Mira said. Not a lone demon with a flair for showmanship. Rumi's gut sank. So they planned this. The Saja boys are the lure. The pouch is the bait. The fans are the hook, Zoe finished. Mira breathed, hard and careful. We lost them for now. But they'll have to show again. These kinds of demons crave an audience. They'll come out tonight. If not the stage, then the variety show they promised. We stake the route, watch the entrances, and we bring a clean takedown. No crowd casualty, no viral footage. We do it quick and quiet. Rumi looked from one face to the next. Myra's set jaw, Zoe's clenched fingers, the way the air around them seemed to thin into focus. They were exhausted from tour, sleep-deprived, and still they moved like hunters. Like people who knew how to make a plan and die on the execution rather than let civilians bleed. Tonight, Rumi agreed. We stake the variety studio. Minimal crew, maximum stealth. Zoe's grin that flashed then was tight and efficient. I'll get the layouts. Mira, you cover ingress. Rumi, you and I tail Jinnu if he shows up as a guest. That's the only way we'll snag the pouch source. Mira nodded once, then exhaled. We lost the trail, but we didn't lose the signs. They left a pattern. They'll repeat what works. They melted back into the noise, a small, urgent shadow among the thousands, while the plaza tried to resume its clap and whistle and glitter. Nobody stopped to check the vendor's knocked-over display, nobody noticed the small group of girls who had chosen the night's finale for a hunt. The city kept believing in pretty songs. On a rooftop across the way, in the curve of a shadowed doorway, Jinnu watched them vanish. He flicked a thumb through the missing pouch between his fingers, careful, reverent, and smiled without warmth. So this was Huntrix, should be easy enough to end them. He pocketed the empty pouch and walked into the purple, where the Saja boys were already lighting up another corner of the city, their music spilling like bait. The lights of the variety show burned hot, the kind that made sweat bead at the nape of your neck. The crowd clapped in rhythm while the Saja boys moved through their set like polished predators, pastel jackets flashing under the spotlights, smiles that were perfunctory and practiced. Jinnu sat front and center in that choreography of arrogance, eyes sharp as a knife. He wore the grin of a man who believed applause owed him breath. High above, in the shadowed rafters, HUNTR/X waited. The leather suits were matte black, tailored to movement rather than fashion. Rumi's braid lay heavy over her shoulder, the braid itself was a line of old promises and steady hands, the only bright slash of color against the dark. Her jacket hugged her like armor, the sword at her peach an iron heartbeat beneath the leather. Myra's polearm gleamed faint violet even in the dim, the wrapped in layers of tape from rehearsal. Zoe's twin daggers winked at the lights when she flexed her fingers, she'd braided a little blue through one pigtail for luck. Once they step off stage, we strike, Rumi whispered, low and certain. Done, 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 Mira and Zoe echoed, a little giggle threaded with the same hard edge that ran through every hunter's voice. They were all business, all smile, until the floor dropped away beneath them and the show went live. The Saja boys played the room like a single instrument. A hot sauce challenge goofy, showy made the audience roar. Jinnu took his shot, swallowing and smiling with theatrical endurance. The crowd loved it. The cameras loved it. Jinnu's eyes flicked up to the rafters, noting the three shadows perched there. He was very good at seeing what others refused to look at. Why say goodbye, Jinnu cooed into the mic with a velvet purr, when we have very special guests tonight. Spotlights swept the rafters. The girls froze, caught like deer in headlights, then forced their practiced smiles into place. Rumi's jaw tightened, her braid sliding over her shoulder as she stood. We just wanted to congratulate our hoobies on their debut, she called, voice bright enough to satisfy the cameras. And of course, Jinwoo said smoothly, charm dripping off him like honey, play games with us. The crowd roared their approval, chanting. Before HUNTR/X could react, stagehands waved them toward the giant rainbow-colored slide set up for the show. They didn't have a choice. Leather against plastic was never meant to happen. The second roomie sat on the slick surface, the sound hit an awful, high-pitched squeak that tore through the auditorium. Mira and Zoe followed, their suits shrieking like tortured balloons. It wasn't just squeaky, it was ear-splitting, the kind of sound that made people in the front rows physically wince and clap hands over their ears. What the hell is that? Someone in the audience groaned. Make it stop, another shouted. Rumi grimaced, cheeks flaming red as the sound dragged on. Mira squeezed her eyes shut, muttering, the leather has betrayed us. Zoe, trying to laugh it off, ended up squeaking even louder as she shifted on the slide. Then plop. One by one, they landed in the ball pit below. The audience erupted into a mix of horrified laughter and secondhand embarrassment. The girls scrambled upright, plastic ball clinging to their suits. Rumi bowed stiffly, her smile strained. Mira tried to salvage it with a little flourish. Zoe muttered, I'm never living this down. The crowd cheered anyway, because the spectacle worked. The Saja boys took their bows across from them, graceful and smug, while HUNTR/X stood dripping with humiliation. Exactly the kind of distraction Jinwoo had planned. The audience was still buzzing, half laughing, half cringing from the squeaky slide debacle when the Saja boys straightened up at center stage. With synchronized grace, they bowed. Not to be outdone, HUNTR/X matched them, bending lower. Their leather creaked and groaned audibly, but their smiles didn't break. The Saja boys dipped deeper. HUNTR/X forced themselves to copy, lowering further until Zoe winced, Myra's back gave a dangerous pop, and Rumi's braid brushed the floor. The audience gasped at the absurd politeness duel. The Saja boys bowed again, sharp and flawless. HUNTR/X tried to follow, but the angle was brutal. Rumi's ribs ached, Mira let out a muffled grunt, and Zoe hissed through her teeth, this is actual torture. The crowd roared with laughter and applause. Then, without warning, the Saja boys straightened, waved sweetly to their fans, and bolted off stage in a puff of pink smoke. Baby Saja perched piggyback on Abby's shoulders like it was all part of the choreography. Rumi's polite smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. Well, she said, voice tight, thank you for having us. HUNTR/X bowed one last time shallow this round, their spines begging for mercy before slipping off the stage in pursuit. The crowd cheered at the spectacle, none realizing the performance had just turned into a hunt. Steam curled in lazy ribbons through the men's bathhouse, the sound of water lapping against stone echoing under the lantern light. The door creaked open. HUNTR/X slipped in, leather boots squeaking faintly against damp tile. Jinwoo was already waiting, leaning against the far wall, his pastel hair damp but perfect. His smirk widened when he spotted them. Wow, he drawled, did you really follow us into the bathhouse? Abby chuckled beside him, arms folded. Of course they did. That one's always looking at me. Zoe's eyes went wide, pupils shimmering into literal hearts. She shook her head violently, but the blush on her cheeks betrayed her. And no. I wasn't. I don't. Mira, caught staring too long, blinked hard. Her thoughts snapped to Sasuke, and suddenly Abby's smug grin wasn't so impressive anymore. She folded her arms, looking away. Rumi didn't flinch. Her braid swung like a blade as she stepped forward, sword half drawn. Leave our honeymoon alone. We're going to send you back to GWIMA. Jinwoo scoffed, a cruel little laugh. We're not here to fight you. He lifted his hand, snapping his fingers. They are. The water trembled and then surged. Dozens of liquid shapes rose from the steaming baths, grotesque forms of twisted faces and clawed limbs. Water demons hissed, their soulless eyes glowing pale blue. Perfect, Mira muttered, resonance flaring to life. She twirled her polearm, stance tightening. Rumi, go. We'll deal with these. Zoe spun her daggers in each hand, grinning despite the tension. Finally, some fun. The demons lunged. Mira and Zoe met them head-on, steel clashing against liquid claws, their hunter training sharp and instinctive. Myra's polearm swept wide arcs, splitting the water constructs apart. Zoe darted low, blades carving precise cuts, her agility carrying her between snapping jaws. Rumi didn't waste time. She bolted past the chaos, chasing Jinnu as he slipped through the bathhouse's rear exit. Outside, the air was sharp and cool, the alley glowing under buzzing neon signs. Jinnu's voice echoed as he ducked and weaved through crates and lanterns. Careful, Hunter. Watch the face I needed to steal your fans. He flickered like a mirage, teleporting just behind her. Rumi spun on reflex, her heel slamming into his chest. The impact. Cracked stone as Jinnu slammed against the wall. She surged forward, blade raised to strike. But his hand shot out, yanking at her jacket. Leather tore. For the first time, Jinnu froze. His eyes dropped to the markings coiled along her arm. A demon, he whispered, his grin faltering. A hunter who's part demon. Rumi's grip tightened on her sword, but her voice was steel. Say another word, and I'll end you. Before Jinnu could answer, footsteps pounded behind her. Mira and Zoe burst from the bathhouse, bloodless cuts on their suits where water claws had nearly landed. Both had their weapons raised, ready. And that was what shattered Jinnu. He saw the way they looked at Rumi, saw that they knew about the patterns. And they didn't care. His smirk faltered into something unreadable. With a sharp twist of his wrist, he vanished into pink smoke, leaving only the echo of his voice behind. The three girls stood in silence for a moment, breathing hard. Rumi adjusted her torn jacket, still glaring at the space he'd vanished from. Coward, Mira muttered, lowering her polearm. Zoe wiped her daggers on her thigh, frowning. Good riddance. They turned to leave, footsteps echoing in the alley. But as they passed back into the alleyway, something stirred. An old man hummed softly to himself in the steaming pool, blissfully unaware of what had just unfolded. My little soda pop, he sang, off-key. My little soda pop. The steam thickened around the bathhouse, lantern light turning it into shifting clouds of gold. An old man hummed off-key in the water, head tilted back, oblivious to the ripple behind him. The demon rose, its maw stretching too wide, claws dripping black water. It reached. And froze. An inky hand, jet black and liquid, snared its wrist mid-swipe. Another claw of ink coiled around its throat. The demon thrashed, snarling, but the grip only tightened, pulling it into the steam. From the far corner, a pale-faced teen leaned casually against the stone, his lips curled into a faint, too-perfect smile. A brush pen rested between his fingers, a small scroll unrolled on the ground beside him, still gleaming wet with black strokes. The demon's screech cut off as the ink construct ripped through it, scattering the water like torn fabric. With a twitch of the boy's hand, the construct dissolved back into lines on parchment, vanishing as though it had never been there at all. The old man sighed, blissfully unaware. My little soda pop, my little soda pop. The teen rolled up the scroll in silence, the false smile lingering like a mask. His eyes flicked toward the door where the Saja boys had fled, then down to the rippling water. Hunter/X almost dropped the ball, he murmured softly, his voice flat, emotionless. Oh well. Danzo will be pleased to hear no casualties. He tucked the scroll away, lips still holding that unsettling smile, and vanished into the steam. Jinnu sat in the shadow of an alley roof, the neon of the variety show bleeding into the night like spilled ink. He had watched them up close, how Rumi moved, the way the leather had split on impact, the gleam of those hunter marks crawling along her forearm. He'd thought the reveal would be his leverage. He'd imagined the gasp, the bargain, the way her shame could be twisted and sold back at a profit. Instead she'd raised her chin and fought. He felt something cold and unfamiliar in his chest, irritation that wasn't purely professional. For 4 centuries he had learned to enjoy his amusements and then discard them. GWM's throne room rewarded ruthlessness and obedience. Jinwoo kept his head because he wanted to sleep at night without dreaming of teeth in his throat. But the promised GWMA had dangled forgetting gnawed at him like a hunger that sharpened his wit and dulled his conscience. If he completed this task, if the Han moon cracked and the golden seal failed to form, if he fed the infernal appetite enough warm, screaming souls, then GWMA would grant him oblivion. No old defeats, no faces that haunted his mirrors. A clean slate. Jinwoo wanted it with the white-hot greed of someone who'd kept too many debts of memory for too long. Orders were orders. Hearts were petty. The plan would continue. He checked the street below one last time. Rumi's silhouette disappeared into a side door with her sisters and the manager. No BLD, no panic, only the graceless, human business of saving their lives and then laughing, the kind of laughter that made him uneasy. He'd expected crumpled sobs, desperate bargains. He'd not expected the way the 3 of them had moved as one song, stance, and steal a domestic storm that showed no fear of him. Jinwoo rubbed his fingers along the rim of his BPOC case until the wood hummed under his touch. He liked the sound. He liked the silence that followed it, a pause where future plans could be plotted. Report, a voice had already asked when he returned to the shrine, flat, hot, full of teeth. GWMA's throne sat like a furnace in the center of the cavern. The Demon King's eyes were stacked coals, every time they blinked ash fluttered to the floor. Around him, lesser demons bowed until they made puddles on the stone. Jinwoo bowed too, a practiced motion that tasted of soot and regret. They could have been useful, GWMA rasped, as if Jinwoo's thoughts were visible smoke. You followed her. You saw the mark. You nearly had them by the throat. Jinwoo's fingers tightened on the BPA case. We were visible. The Hanmun's shield is aligning. The fans' devotion is stronger than we'd expected. The humans adore them. Love is a stubborn thing. I move to corrupt the chorus, sir. I take hearts from the crowd, little by little. GWMA's laugh was a canyon collapsing. Little things widen into rivers. Break their anchors. Break the Hanmun's feeders. When the seal grows brittle, the golden light will not hold. You will bring me a feast. I will not fail, Jinwoo said. He did not tell GWMA about the way his pulse stuttered when he'd seen Rumi lift her head after he tore the leather. He did not tell him he'd almost wanted to put down his scheme and teach her a new song instead. Good. The king's palms were warm as molten ore. But be quick. The Akatsuki move in whisper chords. They seek the resonance too, and they do not like to be pushed aside. If they bite first, you will have only your tricks and no treasures left to sell. Jinwoo bowed again. The shadow of the boy band he'd created flickered in his mind, pink hair and lollipop smiles, and he smiled back, a relish that had nothing to do with music. Seoul had not cooled when the girls arrived back at the penthouse. They came in smelling of steam and salt and antiseptic, their robes kicked aside, bandages wrapped in secret places, and their laughter snapped like fresh twine. The bathhouse incident had spun away into a dozen Sajaboy clips and a trending hashtag. For the public it was a stunt. For HUNTR/X and their manager it was an inconvenience, a threat, and, if anything, a spur. Bobby was already a live wire. He had both hands on his phone and a brow that made his whole face look like an exclamation point. Okay. State Fair is 2 weeks out. Awards in 9. We can't have pink smoke idols eating up the air between you and the crowd. I've got a call with production. No, don't make the video, Zoe, and I want a fresh concept. If the Saja boys are trying to feed the Han Moon, we starve them out with exposure. Mira flopped down, rubbing the back of her neck. We write a diss track, we tear their choreography apart, and bonus make the stage 90% more dangerous so they don't want to come back. Zoe, still sticky with bathhouse steam, rehearsed a punchline and tossed it at Bobby. We need choreography that makes hearts not only swoon but fear for their lives. Rumi said nothing for a beat. She stared at the bandage on her arm, at the faint pink outline where the hunter marks lay beneath skin. She had never hidden them willingly. She had never been ashamed of being both a hunter and something that bore the Hanmun's trace. That was part of what had made Jinnu blink, proof she had not expected to be weaponized by an enemy who took advantage of solitary shame. "You okay?" Mira asked, because she always asked. "Yeah," Rumi said quietly. "I'm fine." Bobby cut in with the business side. "We go heavy on image control. We need footage of you all late night practice, close up on the stuff the Saja boys don't show. And we get a news CYCL talking about how the Hanmun is safe because HUNTR/X is on the prowl. Fans follow narratives. If we get theirs to double back on them if their fandom turns on them, then the resonance thins." Zoe clapped. "So play them at their own game. But better." Rumi swung her braid over a shoulder and smiled the small, tired smile of someone pulling courage like a coat over their shoulders. "We do our jobs. We sing. We hunt." The girls talked late into the night, mapping a plan of sharp harmonies and harder steps, the kind that would push the fandom's attention into a pressure cooker where the Saja boys' pink veneer would crack. It was strategy, but also ritual. In their hands, a stage was a weapon. In their voices, a shield. Outside, across the city, a small pocket of demons chewed on plans that smelled of footprints and music. Jinnu's boy band had posted a clip and trended into the morning. Somewhere else, GWIMA lifted his hand and the cavern evaluated the odds. Inside the penthouse, Rumi looped her braid around her wrist and picked up the scythe she preferred for close work. She didn't tell anyone about the scrape where Jinnu had hit her shoulder. She smiled when they laughed, and she trained when they rehearsed. Hunters collected scars like medals, and she was tired of explaining. She had learned to live with both halves of herself. Tonight, she would make them an anthem. Far away, on a rusting freighter riding a low swell, Naruto listened to the same static of trending words and celebrity noise. He laughed softly when Rumi blurted into the phone about the squeaky leather and then went quiet, the way people do when the world demands they leave a safe room. He'd been summoned to the cloud the next day. He told her, without fanfare, that he'd be careful, words that were less a promise than a vow. Rumi folded the phone into the curve of her shoulder. "Come back," she said, and it was not a plea so much as a command from someone who loved a man grown into his own storms. "Always," he answered. He did not add that he carried 1,000 small fears like coins. He didn't need to. She could see them in how his voice thinned on the last syllable. He had a plan, too: keep people safe first, and fight second. Let the storm frighten when it had to, fight in the open when he had the chance. He would be careful for her, because her hands had drawn scars into him, soft reminders of a life that would not be the same if he failed. When their calls clicked off, they both paused, staring at the screens that held each other in pixels and light. For a few heartbeats they were island from the war the world would insist on making of them. Then the world came clanging back like a bell. The girls stacked their gear. Bobby booked flights. Jinnu tuned his beepa and whispered to the shadows the sort of lies that made demons smile. In the back alleys and the live feeds and the hollows between songs, a war of audiences and souls stretched into motion. The Hanmun trembled on its golden hinge. Hunters sharpened blades and families packed bread. Jinnu's want for oblivion burned steadily. Rumi pulled a jacket on over the scabbard at her peach and walked to the rehearsal mirror, humming the chorus they would use to answer the Saja boys. When she lifted her head, she practiced a smile that would reach the people and a voice that could split night. Jinnu watched from where he had retreated, and for the first time in a long while, the hunter in him felt less like quarry and more like a possible prey. Orders were still orders. Plans were still plans. But for everyone, Rumi in leather still smelling of bathhouse steam, Naruto on a rocking deck, Jinnu in his shadowed corner. The next move had already been made. The board was set. The coyotes and the kings had begun to circle. The ship rocked under the weight of its cargo, steel crates groaning as chains tightened. Naruto leaned against the rail, hood pulled low, the spray of salt water flecking his face. Below deck, the others argued over the manifest. He didn't care. His thumb hovered over his phone, then pressed call. Back in the Seoul penthouse, the girls were piled across the couches in mismatched pajamas. Snack bags littered the table, half-finished sodas sweating on coasters. Rumi answered first, braids slipping forward over her shoulder. Naruto. Aren't you supposed to be working? I am, he said, his grin curling through the line. Just needed to hear your voice. Zoe made a series of obscene kissy noises until Mira hurled a pillow at her head. Naruto let the background chaos play for a second before he shifted, mock serious. So I caught the replay of that variety show. Rumi sat straighter, eyes narrowing. Oh no. Please don't. What were you wearing? Naruto cut in, voice low like he was interrogating her. Mira groaned so loudly he could hear it through the receiver. Don't feed into him, Rumi. The squeaky leather. Zoe cackled, rolling onto her back. Rumi covered her face with both hands. I was going to throw it away. It was humiliating. Naruto's teasing vanished. His tone shifted, steady and soft. No. Don't. You looked hot. The room stilled. Even through the static, his voice carried like truth. Rumi peeked through her fingers, cheeks burning. You really think so? Really, he said without hesitation. Not just the jacket. All of it. You in leather. Gods, Rumi, you looked incredible. Zoe squealed into a cushion. Oh my gods, he actually said it. Mira muttered, this guy is impossible, though her smirk betrayed her. Rumi froze, every inch of her skin flushed scarlet. She stared at the trash bag in the corner, where the crumpled leather outfit was shoved down like a bad memory. Slowly, she stood, tugged it free, and hugged it to her chest. Thanks, she whispered into the phone, unable to stop smiling. Mira rolled her eyes and threw herself back against the cushions. Unbelievable. Naruto just laughed, the sound rough and warm, carried by the sea air. For the first time since leaving her, the distance didn't feel so wide. The ship rocked gently beneath them, waves slapping the hull as the cargo hold thrummed with noise. Steel crates sat chained down, glowing faintly with sealing tags, their weight almost humming with power. Sakura ticked off the manifest with brisk strokes, while Sasuke leaned against a post, arms folded. The Cloud trio stood nearby, Karui, Omoi, and Samui sharp-eyed and watchful. Naruto finally came down the stairs, hood tugged low, that sheepish grin plastered across his face. Sakura caught it immediately. You weren't on the phone again, were you? Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe. Sasuke smirked, not even looking. Up. Rumi. Karui blinked. Rumi? Who's that? Naruto shrugged, voice casual. Just my girlfriend. But Karui's sharp eyes spotted the faint glow in his pocket. Before he could react, she plucked the phone out. Naruto yelped, but the screen was already in her hand. The picture froze them all, Rumi, radiant and laughing, pressing a kiss to Naruto's cheek. He wasn't posing like a celebrity or warrior, just smiling with an ease that made him look younger, softer. Karui's jaw dropped. That's Rumi. The Rumi. Hunter/X's Rumi. Omoi practically choked. You can't be serious. She's like the most famous idol in the world. And you, oh gods, if this leaks, if demons find out, if her fans find out. Omoi. Karui smacked him upside the head, shutting him up. Samui's gaze lingered longer. Cool, calm, but thoughtful. She glanced from the phone back to Naruto, studying the way he shifted, embarrassed but quietly proud, as if the picture warned him too much to regret. She's something special, Naruto admitted, softer now. He took the phone back, slipping it into his pocket. I don't care about the fame. She's just Rumi to me. Silence hung, broken only by the groan of the ship. Karui and Samui exchanged a look, but their perspective had shifted. For once, neither saw Rumi as the unreachable star. They saw Naruto's unguarded smile, the light in his eyes, and understood the truth. Rumi wasn't the prize. She was the lucky one. Sasuke made a low sound, almost a chuckle, almost a sigh. HN. For him, that was as close as praise came. Sakura looked away, lips curving faintly. She had seen Naruto grin 1,000 times, loud and reckless. But this smile, unguarded, tender, was rare. And it made her realize just how much he'd grown, and how much he'd found in that girl. Sakura cleared her throat, snapping them back to business. We won't see trouble until we hit Russia's waters. Demons don't usually risk the Japan Sea, it's too close to cloud patrols. Still, stay sharp. Omoy adjusted his blade straps and glanced toward the storm-dark horizon. Close isn't safe. Nothing ever is when it's demons. The ship groaned, pushing northward. Every hunter, every ninja felt that this was just the calm before the storm. The steady churn of the ship's engines filled the silence, a dull rhythm beneath the slap of waves against the hull. Lanterns swung with the ship's roll, throwing patches of gold light across steel and shadows. Team 7 and the Cloud Squad gathered near the cargo crates, the tension of earlier fading into something easier. Sasuke studied the sea charts with Samui, both of them quiet and precise, their focus a mirror of one another. Karui leaned back against a bulkhead, arms crossed. Can't believe you ended up with someone like Rumi, she muttered at Naruto, not unkindly, but with that teasing edge. Naruto scratched the back of his head, sheepish. Guess I got lucky. Lucky? Omoy snorted, chewing on the end of his lollipop. Man, if I was with someone like that, I'd. Omoy. Samui's voice cut like ice, shutting him up instantly. Sakura, arms folded, shot Naruto a side eye. You should spend less time bragging about your girlfriend and more time reviewing strategy. I wasn't bragging, Naruto protested, grinning despite himself. Besides, she keeps me grounded. That silenced even Karui. For a second, the only sound was the sea. Sasuke glanced up from the map, catching Naruto's expression, the smile that was softer than his usual grin, the one that didn't belong to a fighter, but someone who finally had something worth holding on to. Karui looked away, lips pressed tight. Samui only nodded once, as though filing the moment away. Omoy, after a long pause, sighed. You know, you might actually be the one person who makes being tied down sound cool. Naruto laughed, the sound easy, warming the cold steel walls of the cargo bay. Then you'll get it one day too. Maybe. The ship rocked gently, carrying them further north, the salt wind slipping through the vents. For now, the world was still calm, just hunters, and the ocean stretching endless in every direction. The docks of Russia loomed cold and gray, the steel cranes creaking as cargo chains rattled. Workers shouted over the churn of engines, their breath frosting in the air. The crates of tempered steel were already being rolled down the gangplank when the hunters froze as one. Something was wrong. It was subtle, the kind of presence only trained senses could feel. The weight of eyes, heavy and hateful, pressed down on them like the air itself had teeth. Karui's hand flew to her sword. Sparks crawled down the blade, her resonance humming in the dim light. Omoy followed suit, drawing his own weapon, every line of his body coiled and ready. Beside them, Samui's sword slid free with a hiss, cold and sharp, arcs of electricity dancing along the steel. On the leaf side, Sakura's stance shifted instantly. She drew her blade in one smooth motion, roots already creeping across the dock planks as her resonance stirred. Sasuke leapt down from the gangplank in silence, his sword a black mirror of flame, Amaterasu roaring to life like a predator starved too long. Naruto walked forward last. Calm. Unhurried. His hood shadowed his whisker-marked face, his blade still sheathed. His steps echoed against the wood as if he had all the time in the world. Karui gaped. What is that idiot doing? Sakura's voice rang sharp over the rising tension. Wait for it. The dockworkers shifted, whispers rippling through the crews. Some the veterans, the ones who had seen this before straightened, eyes widening. Others, the fresh-faced hires, just blinked and pointed at the sky as thunderheads rolled in. Naruto stopped at the edge of the dock, lifted one hand, and called. The storm answered. Lightning hissed across the sea, wind ripping through the crates, rain misting up from the waves. Clouds swirled above, condensing, twisting, until they formed the massive outline of a fox. 9 tails of wind lashed behind it, lightning burning through its ribs, eyes alive with fury. The kitsune roared. The resonance thunderclap hit like a hammer. The weaker demons broke immediately, their disguises shredding as they shrieked and fled into the alleys. The stronger ones faltered, fear dragging claws through their minds. Now. Sasuke barked, and dove straight into the first cluster, his black flames tearing through them like a storm of ash. Sakura was at his side in a heartbeat, roots bursting up from the dock to bind one demon as her blade pierced another, her willow stance cutting them apart in smooth, punishing arcs. The Cloud Trio needed no further prompting. Sparks lit the mist as Karui and Omoi clashed with the fleeing creatures, Samui's cold precision slicing through their defenses. None of them understood what Naruto had just done, not fully. But they didn't need to. The demons were running for their lives. And the hunters gave chase, cutting them down cleanly, until the dock was silent but for the hiss of rain and the kitsune's vanishing growl. The last demon fell smoking onto the planks, its body dissolving into residue as the mist cleared. The dockworkers slumped against crates, shaken but alive, their eyes wide at the carnage they hadn't even understood was happening. Team 7 regrouped at the edge of the dock, the Cloud Trio close behind, weapons still hot with resonance. Karui was the first to break the silence, shoving her sword back into its sheath with a sharp clang. What the hell was that stunt, huh? You just walked out there like you owned the DMN Ocean. Her voice was sharp, but before Naruto could answer, Samui cut in. Calm. Clear. Almost measured. You summoned your resonance to scare them away from the docks, she said, her blade sliding into its sheath with quiet finality. A display, not a clash. That way, there'd be no casualties. No dockworkers caught in the crossfire. Her words stilled the air. Even Karui blinked, her protest dying in her throat as the logic hit. Naruto nodded once, eyes steady. Exactly. They weren't powerful. If they were, they wouldn't have waited here like rats in the dark. They would have struck us before we docked. While sometimes we don't get the luxury, and we have to fight in the middle of civilians if there's a way to avoid it, I'll always choose that. The sea wind curled around them, cold and briny. Sasuke and Sakura didn't react. This was Naruto, through and through. They'd seen him do this before. They understood. But the Cloud Shinobi? Something shifted in their faces. Karui's sharp edges softened just a little. Omoi straightened, his usual nerves gone quiet. And Samui, cool, unreadable Samui, gave the smallest nod, respect glinting in her eyes. For the first time since they boarded the mission, they weren't looking at Naruto as just a partner or an ally. They were looking at him with respect. The caravan pushed inland, the tempered steel crates rattling on their sleds and wagons as oxen strained against the HRNSS. The land rolled out before them in endless fields, the wind carrying whispers of distant rivers. Minor demons crossed their path now and again, twisted things skulking on the edges of villages or shadows darting in the treeline. But none were strong. None were brave. A flicker of Sasuke's black flame, a sweep of Sakura's willow blade, or Naruto's storm at his back, and they scattered like leaves before a gale. It was almost too easy. Too calm. Every hunter in the party felt it. Even the Cloud trio kept their hands close to their hilts, eyes scanning the trees as though waiting for the other shoe to drop. Still, the journey pressed on. Step after step, league after league. By the time the first peaks broke the horizon, the tension eased only slightly. The mountains rose like giants from the earth, jagged crowns cutting into the sky. Snow dusted the highest tips, gleaming gold beneath the sinking sun. Clouds swirled around them, not like storms, but like sentinels guarding something sacred. As they crested the last ridge, the cloud village revealed itself nestled into the cliffs, carved into the stone itself. Bridges of rope and steel stretched across chasms, banners snapped in the wind, and watchtowers glowed with lantern light. Naruto stopped, breath caught in his chest. Breathtaking, he whispered. Even Sasuke's stoic gaze lingered a little longer than usual. Sakura smiled faintly, sweat and exhaustion forgotten in the face of such a sight. For a moment, it wasn't just a mission. It was the kind of view that reminded them what they were fighting to protect. The gates of the cloud loomed high, iron and stone set into the cliffside. Hunters in storm-etched armor lined the walls, spears gleaming with resonance. As the leaf SCRT crossed the final bridge, the air itself seemed to grow sharper, heavier. The villagers parted, eyes following every step. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some murmured about the crates, others about the masks. No one smiled. Naruto felt at the quiet weight of suspicion. To them, they were strangers. Outsiders. Leaf hunters walking into a fortress where every weapon was sacred, every secret guarded. No cheers. No greetings. Just silence. The guards waved them through after Samui presented her credentials. The people drifted back to their homes, the watch still lingering in their eyes. Only when the last villager disappeared behind the lantern-lit streets did Samui exhale softly. They'll stay cold until they know you're not a threat. Sasuke's Sharingan eye glinted behind his mask. Then we keep it that way. Sakura nodded. No reason to expose ourselves for civilians who don't understand. Naruto stayed quiet. His gaze lingered on a child clutching her mother's hand, staring up at him like he was some phantom. He let the moment pass, then followed the others deeper into the village. Once they reached the inner citadel, the doors shut heavy behind them. The crowd was gone. Only cloud hunters remained, men and women with resonant scars across their arms, eyes sharp with recognition. Samui gave a small gesture. Now. Sakura tugged her mask free first, exhaling relief. Sasuke followed, his face as calm and composed as ever. Naruto hesitated, then pulled his hood back, golden hair catching in the torchlight. The room shifted. Respect. Recognition. Familiarity. Here, there were no whispers of doubt, only the unspoken nod of hunters who knew the weight of the path. A veteran leaned forward on his spear, lips curling in the barest of smiles. Stormbringer. Willow Serpent. Black Fawn. Welcome. Naruto inclined his head slightly, not grinning, not bowing, just that quiet respect returned in kind. For the first time since stepping foot on cloud soil, the air felt warmer. Past the citadel, the tone shifted. The streets weren't lined with wary villagers anymore here, only hunters and their families lived. Lanterns glowed soft over carved stone, the air alive with something leaf hunters knew well but had almost forgotten, the quiet joy of a sanctuary. Children ran barefoot through the courtyards, wooden swords clattering in mock battles. A boy with hair white as snow chased after a girl waving a paper fox mask, their laughter echoing off the mountain walls. A group of teens sparred under the eye of an old veteran, resonant sparks crackling harmlessly as he barked corrections but couldn't hide the grin tugging at his mouth. Hunters leaned against the doorframes of homes, sharing flasks, laughter rumbling like thunder. Some bore scars, others bore armor still stained with the day's patrol, but in this space, they laughed freely, something that only existed in hidden villages like Cloud or Leaf, where strength and family braided together into survival. Sakura paused to watch the kids dart past her, their joy so unguarded it tugged at her chest. She smiled despite herself. Naruto's eyes softened, watching a tiny girl leap at her father's back as he caught her mid-air with one arm, spinning her in a circle. For all the BLD, all the weight of the hunter's path, here was proof they weren't only death and duty. Here was life. "Hey!" a boy's voice rang out suddenly, high and bold. He couldn't have been older than 9, his hair sticking up like straw. He pointed right at Naruto, eyes wide. "You're Rumi's boyfriend. I saw you in that interview." The courtyard hushed for a moment, and the boy's mother flushed scarlet, dragging him back by the collar. "Forgive him," he blurts out whatever comes into his head. But Naruto just laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. His grin was easy, unbothered. "It's not a secret," he said warmly, looking around at the other hunters now watching with curious smiles. "Not to family. And all of us here we're family. Secrets don't have to be hidden from family." The tension broke at once. The mother relaxed, murmuring her thanks. The boy beamed like he'd been given permission to brag forever. Around them, more hunters chuckled, their respect deepening not for his strength this time, but for the way he carried himself among them. Sasuke glanced sideways at Naruto, a rare flicker of approval in his eyes. Sakura's lips curved upward. Samui nodded quietly to herself. No wonder she chose him. The boy's shout must have been all it took. In minutes, half a dozen hunter kids broke from their games and crowded Naruto, eyes huge. They tugged on his sleeve, clutched at his coat, stared up with a mixture of awe and mischief. "Is it true you can make storms?" one asked, voice squeaky with excitement. "Can you really fly inside a fox made of wind?" another piped up. "Show us the kitsune. Please, please, please." Their parents laughed softly from the edges of the courtyard, some shaking their heads, others too curious to drag the kids away. Naruto held up his hands, embarrassed, glancing at Sakura and Sasuke for rescue. Sakura just crossed her arms, smirking. Sasuke arched a brow. "You heard them." Naruto sighed, but his grin betrayed him. "All right, just a little one. But no telling your teachers I distracted you from training." The kids clapped and bounced in place as he raised one hand. The air shimmered around his fingers, pulling into a spiral. A gust whirled through the courtyard, scattering petals from a nearby blossom tree. Then, with a playful snap, a small kitsune of wind and mist bounded into life, no larger than a puppy. Its 9 tails swished, scattering sparks of blue light, and it yipped in a voice like a breeze whistling through bamboo. The children erupted into squeals. 2 of them chased after it, their wooden swords clattering as they tried to fight it. Another crouched down, giggling as the kitsune nosed his hand, the air ruffling his hair. Even the veterans stopped to watch. Some smiled faintly, others murmured to each other. They had seen hunters with resonance beasts before, but never something so alive, so playful. Naruto crouched, scratching the kitsune's head with a finger, and it flicked its tails before dissolving back into mist. The kids groaned in disappointment, but their eyes shone. "Can you teach us that?" one begged. "Maybe someday," Naruto chuckled. "But first you gotta survive your teacher's drills. Trust me, those are scarier than any demon." The courtyard rippled with laughter again, warm and easy. And though none of the cloud hunters said it aloud, the thought passed through all of them. If this was the boy who carried storms in his hands, maybe the stories hadn't exaggerated. Maybe he really was the Stormbringer. The climb into the Rakich's office was lined with banners and guards, the air heavy with the weight of history. When the doors swung wide, I was already there, broad as a mountain, voice booming before the Leaf Shinobi had even crossed the threshold. "Leaf Hunters," he barked, grinning wide. "It's been 2 DMN long." Sasuke and Sakura inclined their heads politely, but it was Naruto who drew ice eye. The Raikage grin softened, a flicker of recognition cutting through his bluster. I knew your parents, he said, his tone deepening, carrying the echo of memory. Minato Namikaze. Kushina Uzumaki. Good hunters. Fierce. The kind you could trust when the night was darkest. The word struck Naruto like a blade and a bomb at once. For a heartbeat, he froze then stood straighter, stepping forward. Slowly, he bowed low, his voice quiet but steady. Thank you, he said. It's an honor to know they're remembered. Ice's massive arms crossed over his chest, and he gave a single, deliberate nod. They are. You carry their fire. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was respect, shared between warriors who understood loss and duty. Even the aides at the edges of the room bowed their heads, their usual displn slipping into something reverent. Sasuke's dark eyes flicked to Naruto, a rare softness in them. Sakura's lips curved in the faintest, proudest of smiles. And Naruto, he straightened from his bow, the storm inside him settling into something clear and sharp. Ice's grin broke through again, thunder rolling back into his voice. Now let's talk about your mission. You've brought steel, haven't you? I want to see what kind of bite the leaves forged this time. The Raikage's grin lingered as he waved them further in, his massive hand gesturing toward the low table at the center of the office. Scrolls, maps, and ironclad manifests were stacked high, a lifetime of work spread in careful layers. Sit, I rumbled, lowering himself onto the heavy cushions with a surprising ease for his size. We've got much to speak on. Sasuke settled first, posture sharp as a blade. Sakura followed, her eyes already flicking over the reports with a healer's pragmatism. Naruto eased down last, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. He still carried the Raikage's earlier words with him. I reached for one of the scrolls, unrolling it with a snap. The inked diagrams gleamed in the lamplight, showing crates, sigils, and jagged lines marking routes across seas and borders. The steel you brought us, I said, tapping the parchment, we forge it here in Cloud. Temper it. Make it something even demons can't swallow. His eyes flicked up, sharp as lightning. But the leaf your forges, your smelters, you've got the secrets to bend it further. Together, it becomes more than just metal. It becomes survival. Naruto leaned forward, studying the markings. So Cloud provides the body, and Leaf gives it a soul. Ice teeth flashed in a grin. Exactly. One without the other is nothing but wasted ore. The Raikage set the scroll aside and reached for another, this one covered in stark red slashes across maps of Europe. His tone hardened, the room's warmth cooling. Now reports. His hand spread wide over Russia's northern border. Demons are pressing harder here. Old scars opening again. Villages hollowed out overnight. Sakura's brow knit. Hunter presence. Thin, I admitted. Too thin. The Russian government, once proud, once stubborn, they're finding us tolerable now. They've no choice. His voice dropped, heavy with disdain. Our kills outnumber their soldiers by thousands. They see it. They know without hunters, their borders bleed. Sasuke's Sharingan flickered once, quietly absorbing the information. And so they bend. I smirked, leaning back, folding arms thick as steel beams. Exactly. Pride doesn't matter when demons claw at your door. Naruto sat in silence for a moment, his hand brushing the hilt of his blade as though grounding himself. He thought of Rumi, of the girls back in Seoul, of the boy who'd pointed him out as her boyfriend. Hunters didn't just fight for steel or borders. They fought for lives, ordinary ones that never even saw the monsters at their door. The Raikage leaned back in his chair, his massive arms folding across his chest. The tension in the room shifted, not heavier, but steadier like thunder before a storm. You came here to deliver tempered steel, and you did, I said. His voice rumbled through the office, every word carrying the weight of command. But I've got a different task for you now. Naruto tilted his head, curious. Another mission? I shook his head. No mission. Not out there, anyway. I want you three here. His hand swept toward the window, where the sprawl of the cloud village climbed the mountainside, dotted with smoke from forges and the laughter of children playing in the streets below. If you stay, I can send more of my hunters out to cull the demons. Push them back harder than they've been hit in years. Sakura's brows furrowed. You want us to reinforce the village itself. Keep the walls safe while your hunters take the fight outward. Exactly, I said, leaning forward, his grin sharp and proud. 3. Elite jonin at our gates that buys me the freedom to unleash the full weight of cloud on the field. For 1 week, the world out there will feel what happens when the storm rolls down the mountain. Sasuke's eyes narrowed, his voice calm but edged. And if the demons catch wind of the gap? They'll try to strike here, I admitted. That's why I need you. If the Leaf's finest stand with Cloud, no demon will breach these walls. Not while I draw breath. The words settled like stone. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind whistling faintly against the office shutters. Naruto's gaze drifted to the window, to the black-clad hunters laughing on the training fields, to the children racing each other with wooden blades. His jaw tightened. If it means protecting them, then I'm in. Sakura gave a sharp nod. Same. Sasuke's answer was softer, but no less certain. Count us in. Ice booming laugh filled the office, pride and relief mixing together. Good. Then Cloud fights harder this week than it has in decades. With the Leaf watching our backs, I'll bleed the demons until they remember who owns this sky. The mood in the Cloud shifted the moment the hunting parties left. What had been alive with chatter and laughter turned quiet, tense. Shutters banged shut one by one, planks nailed into place as families sealed themselves inside. Lanterns went out early. Streets that normally rang with children's footsteps and market calls now stood bare, only the cold mountain wind threading through them. Naruto walked the main thoroughfare with Sakura and Sasuke, the sound of his boots carrying far too loud in the silence. Across the rooftops, jonin patrols kept to the shadows, their resonance muted, eyes sharp. Cloud had been thorough. Every civilian was told to stay inside, leave only for food runs, and even then under a CRT. Lost wages? Covered. Safety came first. Naruto respected that. It was the same thing the Leaf would have done, but here, in the Cloud's stone heart, it felt heavier, the air more oppressive. Samui met them at a crossroads, her pale hair tied back, blade strapped across her back. Sectors 1 through 4 are sealed, she reported calmly. No movement but our own. The Rakige's orders hold civilians stay in, all guard lines reinforced. Karui dropped down beside her, less composed, knuckles white on her hilt. This feels wrong. Too quiet. Sasuke's Sharingan glinted faintly under the hood of his cloak. That's the point. If demons strike, they'll aim for silence first. Make people feel trapped. Naruto's hand rested casually on his blade hilts, though his storm resonance prickled at the edge of his skin like it wanted to taste the air. Then they'll find out real quick they picked the wrong village. Sakura glanced down an empty street where curtains twitched, families peeking, then vanishing again. She lowered her voice. You can feel it too, can't you? Fear. Like the village is holding its breath. Naruto nodded. He could feel something else too, something tugging faintly at the edge of his resonance, not threatening, just familiar. Like a storm in the distance answering back. He frowned but said nothing. Behind them, 10 elite Cloud jonin stood like statues, scattered at choke points, guarding the Rakige's tower, the armories, and the forges. Their presence was a reminder, if demons came, they would meet the sharpest teeth the Cloud had left behind. Naruto lifted his hood, looking out past the walls where thunder rolled low against the mountains. Guess this is home for the week. Samui's gaze flicked his way. For a week, you're part of the Cloud. Treat it like yours. Naruto smiled faintly. Don't worry. I already do. The mess hall was usually loud clattering dishes, gossip from squads just back from patrol, kids sneaking in for scraps. Tonight, it was hollow. Only a handful of tables were lit, hunters sitting apart, speaking in low voices. Every creak of wood or shift of a chair felt too sharp, too loud. Naruto sat with Sasuke and Sakura, opposite Samui, Karui, and Omoi. A pot of stew steamed between them, thick and heavy with mountain root vegetables. They ate in silence for a while, spoons scraping. Omoi finally muttered, "I hate this. The quiet. Makes it feel like something's watching you even when nothing is." Karui elbowed him but didn't disagree. "Shut up. You're making it worse." Samui didn't even flinch, her calm voice steady. "That's why we're here. To hold the line. To remind them they're safe." She looked at Naruto. "Your storm earlier at the docks. That's what it did. You terrified the demons, but more importantly, you reassured the people watching. That's why they respect you." Naruto rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Guess I was just doing what felt right. Better scare a few demons than risk kids running around the pier, you know." Sasuke smirked. Same old Naruto. Too reckless to think about strategy, too stubborn to let anyone die. Naruto shot him a look, but Sakura hid a smile behind her spoon. For a moment, the heaviness lifted. Still, when the meal ended and the others drifted to their posts or quarters, Naruto found himself restless. The silence of the cloud pressed too deep on his ears. He stepped out into the mountain air, the sky bruised with clouds, and there it was again, that faint tug at the edge of his soul. Not danger. Not malice. Just resonance. Familiar, like the echo of his own storm calling back. He followed it through the winding streets, boots crunching against stone, until the tug grew sharper. Around a quiet training yard, sparks of gold flickered in the air like fireflies. A figure stood alone at the center, tall, lean, movements coiled with power. Her dark hair gleamed under the lantern light, twin blades in her hands humming with golden resonance. Yujito ni. She paused mid-swing, her head snapping toward him. The pull between them hit harder, undeniable. Storm recognizing storm. Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. "You feel it too," she said simply. Naruto nodded, stepping closer. "Yeah. Like the same storms in both of us. Only," he scratched his cheek. "Yours feels steady. Mine's a lot bigger. Wilder." Her mouth curved into the faintest of smirks. "Then let's see if that storm of yours can keep up with mine." Naruto grinned, drawing his blades, his pulse already quickening. "Guess we're sparring, then." The mountain air crackled. Two storms, ready to collide. The training yard was quiet when they began. Just Yujito, poised with her twin blades, her stance like coiled fire, and Naruto, rolling his shoulders loose, twin swords gleaming in the gray light. His storm hummed under his skin, not roaring yet just steady, like a tide drawing in. Their first clash was sharp, steel ringing, a shower of sparks. Yujito pressed forward with feline speed, each cut a clean, purposeful strike. Naruto flowed with it, whirlpool style, carrying him like a current, his blades never stopping, redirecting her momentum with fast, shallow slashes, his footwork sliding over stone like water, finding every crack. The yard filled with sound, the rush of his wind, the hiss of her flames. Blue sparks trailed her, arcs of resonance licking the ground. "Too slow," she teased, darting past his guard. Naruto spun, lightning charging along his edge, the air snapping as his counter forced her to retreat. "Or maybe you're too fast to see me coming." They circled, their movements building pressure. The more they fought, the more it felt less like a duel and more like two storms colliding. The pull of their resonance rippled across the village. By the time Yujito's Matabi form roared into life, the two-tailed cat burning with azure fire, the yard's walls were lined with hunters. Elites leaned against the stone, arms crossed, eyes wide. These were men and women who had killed more demons than they could count, but even they knew this was different. This wasn't training. This was a clash of monsters. Naruto's kitsune answered, dark clouds and rushing wind filling the air, its body flickering with gales. Unlike Yujito's inferno, his storm was sharp, merciless, fast the current that drowns before you realize you're swept away. They charged again. Naruto blurred, whirlpool style snapping tighter. Each strike came like a wave breaking fast, repeated, relentless. Yujito's blue fire claws raked against his guard, sparks exploding as he turned them aside, only for another slash to come from a different angle. His blades moved so quickly they carved lines of compressed air that snapped like whips. She drove him back, but never past the current. Every time she pressed too hard, the wind shifted, the water pulled her strike just an inch too far, and Naruto's lightning-quick riposte clipped her guard. The elites watching muttered low, some shaking their heads. They couldn't follow every strike. Not fully. Sasuke had once told Naruto his movement was too wild, too open. Whirlpool style now proved him wrong. It wasn't wild, it was overwhelming. Like standing in a flood. Finally, they broke apart, both breathing hard, resonance sparking the air with static and heat. Yujito's Matabi form licked around her shoulders, tails snapping like whips of blue fire. Naruto's storm kitsune crouched low, its eyes glowing white, the roar of its winds rattling the rafters. Neither of them moved. Then, almost together, their auras dropped. Yujito sheathed her blades with deliberate calm. You hold back, Stormbringer. Even against me. Naruto let his swords rest across his shoulders, grin pulling at his lips. Whirlpool doesn't drown friends. Just enemies. The hunters lining the yard broke into quiet murmurs. Respect. Awe. Even fear. Every one of them knew they'd just watched two forces that eclipsed anything they could muster. And that if these two ever turned their strength loose for real, the world itself would shake. The courtyard still hummed from the echo of the spar. Hunters drifted away in twos and threes, still muttering about what they'd witnessed: Naruto's whirlpool speed, Yujito's blue fire cat, two storms colliding with precision and weight. Naruto let his blades rest against his shoulders, his grin crooked with exhaustion. Yujito brushed a few strands of hair from her face, her breathing steady but her eyes still bright with adrenaline. You fight different, she said simply. Measured. Like you're saving something for later. Storms don't drown friends, Naruto replied, his grin softening into something honest. Yujito tilted her head, studying him for a beat, then smiled faintly. Dinner? You've earned it. Naruto's hand shot up, waving as if to physically push away the idea. Only if it's just as friends. I've got a feisty girl who'd cut me in half if she heard otherwise. For a moment, silence, then Yujito laughed, a sharp, melodic sound that carried across the yard. Fair enough, she said. Friends it is. They turned and walked side by side out of the ring. Behind them, the elite scrambled back into motion. Some barked orders too quickly, others leaned on spears or swords, pretending they hadn't been gawking. But the awe was written in their faces, even among the strongest of the hunters. What they had just seen was on another level entirely. The whispers followed as Yujito and Naruto disappeared down the stone path, the kind of murmurs that would ripple through the village long after the dust of their spar settled. The hall had gone quiet, the fire low in the braziers. Hunters had finished their meals and drifted back to posts, leaving only Naruto and Yujito at the far table. A bowl of stew sat forgotten between them, steam long since faded. Naruto leaned forward, elbows on the table, listening as Yujito spoke. The first time Matatabi stirred in me, I thought I was cursed. Blue fire crawled over my skin when I was a child. I screamed for hours, but it didn't burn me. Everyone else looked at me like I was a monster. So I worked. I trained. I decided if I was cursed, I'd make it a weapon strong enough no one could ignore. Naruto nodded slowly. I know that feeling. My storm came later, but the first time I really unlocked it was when Sasuke almost died. I thought I was going to lose him. I thought I was going to lose everyone again. His jaw tightened, his eyes on the wood grain of the table. I lost my family before I was old enough to remember them. And in that moment, with the storm tearing through me, I swore I wasn't going to lose anyone else. Not him. Not Rumi. Not anyone. Yujito studied him, her golden eyes softer now. You didn't mstr it for yourself. You mastered it to protect. Naruto gave a half smile, shrugging. I don't know if I mastered anything. I just fight until I can't stand. Because if it's me or them, I'd rather it be me. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Before that storm, Yujito asked carefully, what did you want? Before all of this? Naruto blinked, taken off guard. He rubbed the back of his neck, sheepish. Family. That's it. Didn't matter what I did, smith, farmer, some nobody, just wanted a place where I wasn't alone. A rare smile touched her lips. And now? His expression softened, almost glowing in the firelight. Now. I found it. He didn't say Rumi's name, but it was written clear in his eyes. Yujito leaned back, arms folding. Then you're already luckier than most of us. They clinked cups together, the sound sharp in the quiet. To surviving, Naruto said. To surviving, Yujito echoed. What neither of them noticed was the shadow at the door. A handful of elite cloud hunters lingered just out of sight, watching. None spoke, but their eyes said everything. Two monsters, storm and flame, finding common ground. Bonds like that shifted the balance of villages, of wars. It was the kind of connection no one else could measure. And then, as if on cue, the watchers slipped away. Back to their posts, back to their duties. But each carried the same thought as they left: this friendship was dangerous, and priceless. Naruto stretched, laughing under his breath. I should head out before Sasuke chews me out for being gone too long. Yujito stood as well, smirking. Dinner was nice. But don't worry, I know better than to steal time from a boy who already has a fiery girl waiting to cut him down if he steps wrong. Naruto chuckled, rubbing his cheek. Yeah, you got that right. They left the hall side by side, two storms walking in silence, bound not by love but by something equally rare, understanding. The fifth night in the cloud passed quiet, the kind of silence that never sat right with a hunter. Patrols rotated, torches burned at the gates, and the village breathed as if nothing lingered beyond the mountains. But the elites knew better. Calm before a storm was still a storm. Naruto leaned against the guard post, hood pulled low, phone glowing in his hand. Rumi's voice filled his ear, soft and fierce all at once, grounding him across the miles. So these Saja boys, he said, trying not to laugh, you're seriously gonna drop a diss track on them? Rumi huffed. Not just a diss track. A demolition. They won't know what hit them. Her stubborn confidence tugged a grin out of him. Good. Just be careful. Demons or idols, it doesn't matter, they're both slippery. Zoe's voice chimed in from somewhere near the receiver, tell him we're writing 23 more verses. Mira groaned in the background, and Bobby's muffled laughter carried through. Naruto's heart eased. This was family. His anchor. I love you guys, he said, quiet but steady. All of you. The door to the watch post slammed open. Sasuke's silhouette filled the frame, eyes sharp, voice clipped. Naruto. Now. I has summoned us. The warmth drained from the moment. Duty cut sharp as steel. Naruto straightened, the grin fading into focus. I have to go. Be careful, Rumi whispered. Always, he promised, then hesitated, softening his voice just for her. I love you. He ended the call before she could answer, sliding the phone into his pocket. Bobby's voice echoed faintly from the line even after it clicked off, "Careful, kid. Careful." Naruto pulled up his hood. Sasuke was already walking, and Sakura was waiting outside, her hand resting on her sword. The three of them fell into step, no words wasted, each knowing what a summons from the Raikage meant. The calm had broken. Rumi lowered the phone slowly, the call cutting off but Naruto's voice lingering in her ears. For a moment she just sat there, thumb tracing the edge of the case, eyes distant. He always made it sound so easy, always. "I love you," but she knew the weight behind his words. If I had summoned Team 7, it wasn't for something small. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 11. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Slygold on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.